content life. And I would like to lead the conversations in those directions while we discuss aspects of um, India and Singapore and our future, and we'll weave in the conversation very well. But at this time, I would like to request Mr. Nazri, who is a pioneer in AI and fintech in Asia and Asia Pacific, to offer his comments on the topic of India and Singapore emerging technologies and innovation partnerships through his lens. Mr. Nazri, over to you.
You just give me a sec.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to locate my. Every
Share
time I
button.
switch, there seems to be an issue. Just give me a sec. Let me leave and then join again. Pardon me for that.
Mr. Nazri, if it's okay, then I'll request PRK if you are ready to go first.
Yeah, please go ahead first. Yeah.
So PRK, I'm very glad he's here with us, is with TCS. And TCS, as you know, has created several 100,000 jobs globally and in India. And part of that job creation is AI. And TCS is not only about services, wonderful products. Ignio is an example of a product that they had created, which actually goes counter to how TCS is set up. It is intended to automate many of the tasks which previously TCS used to do through linear growth, if you would. So they're going after non-linear growth. I am looking forward to hearing from PRK on the topic of CII's India-Singapore collaborative possibilities.
Thank you, Gopi, and good afternoon, everybody, and good morning to some of you who are in India time. And it is indeed my pleasure and privilege to be at this August audience. Thank you, CII, for giving me this opportunity, and especially given this topic, which is very close to my heart, very close to what I do in TCS for a living. So AI technology advancements is what I just want to quickly touch upon to bring the context of the technology. One of the most important thing, of course, Gartner says it's 9 out of 30 technologies are going to be in AI. AI is not one technology, it is multiple technologies. That is one part of it. The second part of it, AI on its own is not useful. It has to be what I call is the
So PRK, your voice is coming in and out.
Needs to work analytics.
PRK, your voice is coming in and out.
Okay, I will just use my headphones. See if it's
Yeah, that will be good. Yeah.
Is it better?
Much better, thank you. This will work very well.
So that's the most important aspect of AI, that it has to be orchestrated well, governed well, regulated well with other technologies, be it IoT or be it analytics, it could be cloud computing, it could be the 5G connectivity. So that's the most interesting part of this technology, and it has made multiple possibilities real, especially given the technology today supports both structured and unstructured data. It has been able to improve processes, enhance interactions, and of course, solve complex problems. I just want to bring the context of this particular forum, essentially in terms of India and Singapore. It's an interesting comparison in the sense both of them are looking at similar areas in which they want to apply AI. Both of them at the leadership level of the two countries are committed to AI as a strategy because they are convinced that this is a technology which can help them leap forward and, of course, recover from where we are today from a COVID-19 perspective and see where we can go from here. So I've just listed some of the initiatives which Singapore has taken in terms of the AI strategy, rolling out 5G, and some of the areas in which they are looking at is disease management in healthcare, and of course, freight planning, border security, smart estates, and personalized education. But if you look at India, would want to focus on similar areas, but it is a different dimension of a problem. So we need to appreciate the idiosyncrasies of each of these countries. But at the end of the day, both of them want to achieve what would be good for the wellness of respective countries. One of the things we're talking about here is the Economic Development Board and Enterprise Singapore have jointly launched the Tech at SG. And I would cover one of the case studies here, which we have supported by EDB, and we are doing it in terms of Digital Acceleration Center. And I also want to focus on the 7 social themes and what are we doing about in India. So I want to give a perspective of both India as well as Singapore and see how some of those ideas through case studies can we take it forward for a larger interest of both these countries. This is just to highlight some lighthouse projects, just to illustrate, one, about the potential of AI in the Asia context. Two is in terms of how can India provide the scale, which is the strength of India. The strength of India is 3 parts. One is the diversity, so which means we have abundance of data. 2 is the scale and skill development, which can be leveraged by Singapore. 3 is between Singapore and India, can we create a AI service delivery hub? See, these are just ideas and thoughts which I have, which I wanted to share with you, and some of the examples which have been done in India, which could be leveraged across these 2 countries. One is the platform we created for the assessment of examinations in the public sector, railways, and the colleges, which we conduct. Today, in fact, more than 40 million candidates are registered on this platform. We have conducted more than 154 assessments. And there are 161 organizations which have benefited on this platform. What more is that we have created AI courses for students in the school aligned with their appropriate courseware with help from academicians. The Digital Impact Square is an interesting story where we created a service delivery hub as a pilot with the MIT labs. And here we took around 300 plus students and we asked them to come with ideas. We enable them, mentor them to create startups. In fact, 6 of these ideas are already in the growth mode from a startup company. So we focus on agri-tech, we focus on education, we focus on healthcare. Known example, the important aspect of it is the data available is spread all over India. The patients do not have access. So the challenges in this particular case is much different from Singapore. We learned the regulatory and the governance and the discipline of Singapore. We probably look at the diversity and the abundance of data in India and see how we can create a common forum for operations for both these countries. This example is about how do we network 89 cancer hospitals across India and created a common data repository for us to be able to analyze cancer. So this is just 3 examples I want to give in India. This is the Digital Acceleration Center. The important aspect is this was awarded, we took the award from the President of Singapore, awarded with joint collaboration of Singapore Economic Development Authorities. And in fact, our chairman is part of this board. And this is a center we have created to bring in TCS technology expertise, IP and experience. And we will be able to focus on what is important for Singapore. And the main drivers are, of course, upskilling, fostering collaboration, which means startups, academia, how can they work together? And then the last one is, of course, create a platform of innovation. So whatever I talked about is 3 examples in the previous chart. This is what this particular center would focus on. It was in June 2020, we launched it. And I think we have an opportunity to work collaboratively on this. And just like I said, it is just not AI, it's about all the technologies which have to work together and make it happen for empowering communities, supporting government and transforming business. This is another important strategic initiative of Singapore in terms of what they call as a smart nation pillars and how can we work on it. So this one example is about One Changi, which is something we built for the Changi airport. Again, a learning and collaboration collaboration platform. So it was a community which is reasonably big. Just to give you an idea of the scaling possible, it supports 40,000 plus employees, and partners are more than 600, and 500 plus active learners on it. So it allows the employees within the airport to communicate with each other, share your thoughts, create a social platform, and also be able to give latest updates on flight timings or on different aspects of the airport, and at the same time motivate the employees to share their views and perform their tasks much more effectively. This is a very, very important strategic intent of the Singapore government as part of their smart city initiatives, or smart nation initiative, as they call it. One is about the citizen experience. It's about being able to monitor elderly people living in homes which are enabled by an IoT technology, analytics, and AI, and at the same time, it is integrated to an ecosystem of hospitals and healthcare workers. That's an important aspect. We've done it for around, it says 70, it is now around 150 HDB homes in Singapore. And here we are able to monitor the behavior of the people inside the homes. So they have a pattern in their behavior. They wake up at a particular time in the morning, they do certain things in the first 2 hours, then they there is no motion inside the house for the next few hours, things like that. If that pattern gets disturbed, the sensors essentially send an alert, and the ecosystem partners are essentially alerted on that, and appropriate action can be taken. It also has capabilities to be ensuring that the people are having their medicines regularly, and they miss it, we can alert them so that they don't forget their medicines, they don't forget certain exercises and walking which they have to do as part of their wellness. So very nice app which we deployed in these homes, and it is I'm happy to say that it is kind of integrated with their Smart Nation initiatives, and HDB is their housing development board in Singapore, which has deployed it in a smaller community right now, but an example of how we can bring in collaboration between different partners. The next one is, of course, smart airline operations. Again, I want to bring this aspect of IP creation. This is a co-created IP between Singapore Airlines and TCS, and we have a joint go-to-market so that we can sell it to other customers also. The applications is very, very rich in terms of the capabilities. It essentially reimagines the passenger experience, starting from check-in all the way to the boarding, baggage, and resources. So that is the end-to-end customer experience is taken care of by this app. And we have done it along with SIA, and we have an opportunity to take it to the market. So again, I want to highlight an opportunity between India and Singapore. Can we create joint IPs? One is about being part of a smart nation strategy, which is also part of India's strategy. Second is about collaborative IPs, which we can take it to the market. This is an example of a collaboration between TCS and SATS and the Samsung, who made those smartwatches. We created an app for the loaders in the airport, ramp agents as they call it. The important aspect, why did we create it on a smartwatch? So that the two hands of the ramp agents are free. These are the people who are there when a flight lands and it is taxiing towards the gate, the people who direct the pilot to park in the terminal. So that is why we created it on an app on a smartwatch, and we were able to partner with Samsung, and SATS had given us the support to deploy it to the ramp agents. So another example of how an ecosystem works and technology is applied for the productivity and for the larger collaboration of these ramp agents. So the key points essentially are the following. One is, of course, the digital impact about the acceleration center, which has been initiated. How can we start thinking about collaboration between India and Singapore? How can we complement the skills? The way I look at it is that on one hand, Singapore is advanced on the technology side, disciplined on the regulatory and the security part of it. On the other hand, we have the scale and the capability in India, and we also have the same intent in terms of being able to
support smart nation initiative, support healthcare, support infrastructure, so on and so forth. That's the complementary skills, and we have an opportunity. There is commitment from the execs of senior execs of corporates as well as from the government, which is a very important aspect for such an initiative to be much more nationwide across these two countries. And of course, that Digital Accelerator Center is an example where we got the UN award from the President of Singapore in collaboration with EDB Singapore. So that essentially what I wanted to cover quickly in terms of what kind of opportunities we have between Singapore and TCS as an example I gave, but it's a question of between the two countries. There are enormous opportunities. Creation of innovative hubs, creation of collaborative platforms, being able to upskill and cross-skill our citizens, and also being able to provide citizen services through platforms driven by AI, automation, and the different technologies available today. Thank you, and I will be happy to take questions at the end of the next session.
Thank you, PRK. Wonderful points made and great examples given. India is a 2x country over the next decade. We need 2 times the amount of energy. We need to double our food productivity. We need to double our usable water. We need to double our ability to move people around, which is mobility. We need to provide 100,000 more jobs. Right? And TCS has the best capabilities globally to provide scale. Of course, in India, but like you rightly pointed out, Singapore is a good place to showcase the capabilities of TCS as well. But for Singapore also, India is a big market. When I'm talking about 2x in the next decade, if I just pick energy, we will grow from 400 gigawatts to 800 gigawatts. That is 400 gigawatts, which translates to $400 billion in revenue, in generation. Another $400 billion in transmission and distribution. From an AI standpoint, the transmission and distribution part, to make it smart, to make the generation more efficient, to use more renewables. These are all aspects where contributions are possible and collaborations are possible. So we are talking about $800 billion over the next 10 years, $80 billion per year in one area, which I mentioned. So India is also a huge market. And I do hope that the collaborations will be able to keep the market in the near vicinity, if you would. There are also 10x opportunities, media and entertainment, online education, and the connectivity. These are all areas in India which needs to go 10x. And those are wonderful opportunities for Singapore. But I'll also request now Nazri to take the stage and talk about opportunities in Singapore as well as where the collaborations are possible. And you have a Asia Pacific hat, Nazri, so you can go broader. So we can, as together, as countries working together, we can actually target the global market, which is huge.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you, Dr. Gopi and Mr. Krishnan for the lovely presentation. You are right. We are, as you all know, a net exporter of goods and services. So whatever inbound technology we absorb, we have to export it out in a branded, integrated, and scalable manner, the 10x that you mentioned about. So AI is actually on top of mind for most organizations these days. And we are present in 28 countries. That shows how much thirst and hunger people have for AI technologies in different levels of complexity. It encompasses anything from analyzing big data to machine learning, as well as deep learning. Yeah. So on this note, my presentation will be divided into 3 parts. First is the selected AI technology that comes from Singapore through my FinB group, which I'm heading. The second part talks about the AI use cases and the areas, and the third part will be the areas of collaboration that Singapore and India can collaborate in a PPP model, right, between the two countries. So, but let me just put some context into the presentation in a simplified way by defining AI by saying what is not. So AI is not visualization, AI is not dashboarding information, it's not chatbots that answer basic queries in terms of when the office opens or closes and what sort of information you can get. So it's not so static, it's not just a matter of mathematics that shows numbers, matrix, and visuals, right? So how it does in a simplified way is that it moves from weak, moderate to strong AI. It's able to describe what happened, or why did it happen, what can happen in the future, what are the recommendation and action steps that need to be done, and what needs to be monitored by taking into account random and historical as well as systematic variables into the equation. So it must be going through the flow, and it must be able to communicate either in linguistic or language manner or voice. Okay. So in our case, what we specialize in is basically the cognitive aspects of the natural language, where on the left-hand side, you talk about how to handle and deal with the structured data. On the right-hand side, looks at the NLP side, how to analyze the unstructured data. We pass through this data, we go through the 5 levels of analysis. Basically, in any sector, we are industry agnostic, but we're able to use the machine to help the humans and improve turnaround time by minimum of 600%, be able to tell you what happened and benchmark it, profiling it, and explain it in words in various languages like French, Arabic, Mandarin, English, Bahasa, Portuguese, and so on. So it's able to converse with you linguistically as well as verbally. It's able to diagnose and tell you what happened, why did it happen, what can happen in the future, and what needs to be monitored. So very quickly, some of the use cases is that our technology for 14 over years have been used to detect fraud, to detect downfall of companies, to look at the turnaround aspects of a company by looking at not just the historical and the current, but it's able to extrapolate into the future. The AI engine is able to go through the 5 levels and be able to tell you what actually happened, what caused it to happen, what could happen, all the scenario planning and the action steps. So it's able to recommend banks. I think once upon a time, PMOD talked about approving a loan under 1 minute, right? Or is it 1 hour? Under 1 hour in India, right? So imagine the approval is presumably based on in principle approval. But imagine the whole due diligence, asset allocation, capital allotment, loss loan reserve planning, asset-based weighting, for risk-based weighting, as well as recommending what loans amount to give based on the specific risk profile of a company can be determined. So this is how AI can be stretched beyond imagination, whereby it's able to not only recommend to the banker via what you call robo-banker, but it can also be a robo-CFO for the SMEs that didn't get a loan. Out of 10, 7 will get rejected. Okay, do you reject them wholeheartedly, or do you give them explanation and a guided roadmap on how to improve their financials and how to take into account non-financial factors to support their justify their loan application? These days, we are also being called upon to carry out what you call audit, internal as well as external audit, and to detect compliance gaps, as well as to detect fraudulent activities, okay, in an institution as well as in a corporate or even in an audit firm, where you actually have to conduct audit exercise of more than each firm will probably have about 300 to 1,000 over clients, each small medium enterprise practitioner. So imagine you upload all the ledgers, the journals. You can do not just sample testing, but you can do population testing. So if you have 100 over transaction, 100 over 1,000 transactions, you don't take 5% materiality to determine the gaps. You can literally go through all the 100% population and find out what are the top 100, top 1,000 areas that are flagged for inconsistency or anomalies or irregularities. And the system basically will interact and articulate which standards are being breached, what needs to be done, what are the potential implications if this thing continues, and then it takes into account the internal and external environment on a forward-looking basis. So AI can also be used to evaluate millions of individuals' financial health. So in a population where some call it the, that falls below the national poverty level. So you need to do financial planning for them. So by taking into account their basic information like their bills, their invoices, their credit cards, right, and their cash flows, you'll be able to evaluate the financial health and create an avatar. What are you going to be in the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years if you continue to spend and earn in this manner? So it is basically a robo financial planner to help the financial advisors and government agencies, as well as the individuals who need to improve their financials, health, financial well-being, okay, and how to spend it intelligently. So very quickly, how we can collaborate is that we have a Center of Excellence in Innovation. We call it CEAI for short. And what happens is that it carries out various capacity building workshops, research and advocacy, allows for joint ownership of IP. No matter how small, mid-size or big you are, there is an opportunity for organizations, all walks, sizes and types to actually own the IP. And when we first launched it in 2019, in fact, last year, it was met with such strong, what do you call that, receptiveness, reception, as well as encouragement from various industry groups. So we are no longer a fintech player, but suddenly we are into health tech, med tech, edu tech, and so on. So it becomes a very popular destination for companies to set up their own innovation department or their AI lab, so to speak. And you can see that our operations in Singapore and Malaysia illustrate that. And within the center, we have a scheme called the DIAL program, the Digital AI Labs program, that is open to public sectors, agencies, as well as private sector, even non-profit organizations, okay, and NGOs. So basically, it's a very structured, systematic scheme of arrangement. Imagine having the design sprint. We call it design leap, LEAP, design leap, not sprinting anymore. And we are able to develop a prototype under 5 days. And the next 4 weeks, we built into a full-fledged expert systems. And the caption that AirAsia used to say to the public, right now everybody can fly. Our caption in simple terms means that now everybody can own AI. So naturally, the array of technology will not be fixed, will not be stagnated. And so we welcome Indian partners, Indian expertise, and Indian professionals to actually explore how to venture and provide the expertise and do the inbound, outbound technology export, so to speak. All right, so imagine we combine the technology, seed it in Singapore, get all the grants, get all the incentives, export it out in the ASEAN region and all the other countries in our network, right? And so from design sprint, it becomes a design leap. Under 5 days, you have the prototype. Under 4 to 8 weeks, you have the full system ready to roll. So it requires a rapid sort of planning, design, and implementation plan. And this is how it works. It's a 5-stage process. First, you identify the industry pain points. On this note, in Singapore alone, the MAS, Monetary Authority of Singapore, has identified minimum of 80 problem statements affecting and impacting the financial institutions, and more than 100 over in non-FI, okay, by IMDA. So there are and few other agencies and centers that basically reach out to the industries, that reach out to the corporations, reach out to the SMEs that want to automate or inject AI into their operation. So with the end game in mind, which is the either increase in revenue, reduce man hours, and so on, the team in MyFinB, and now if we collaborate with the Indian partners, we will then collectively be the technology subject matter experts to process the structured and unstructured data, create the algorithms, build the 8 deliverables under 5 days, right? And then commercialize it in stage 4, which is the the ultimate holy grail. You develop in full, you commercialize it, you spin off into a vehicle, and then you position for M&A and IPO. And interestingly, MyFinB is actually part of this whole process. 14 years ago, it was a product. Now it's a company, right? So a company that is spun off to become scalable, experience the 10x, and then demonstrate that it can do more than just a fintech, and it can cut across many sectors, many industries, and many use cases. So we are not new to India. I mean, we are young, but we traveled quite a bit to India before COVID, and we have an Indian joint venture team. And we, in fact, the Indian company that I met here called InfoTrust is actually was actually present when I first was invited by CII to give a talk during the visit of CII to Singapore. So he actually approached me, and one thing led to another. Now we have a joint venture. We have MyFinB India. We are able to tap onto expertise, but their expertise is more of the CRM, more of the infrastructure, and more of the business intelligence through third-party softwares like Microsoft Azure and all that. Okay, but essentially, what we work with them now is that we tap onto their CRM, and then we created a robo-advisor for healthcare. So imagine that taking into account medical and non-medical factors, we can look at their financial gaps, we can look at their predictability in terms of the likelihood that the kidneys will not function in the next 2 years, for example. All right, and we can look at all the cardiovascular, 80% of diseases, heart disease and strokes, 80% of type 2 diabetes, 40% of cancer can be avoided, can be reduced. The chances of getting it can be reduced if we have a proper diagnosis and roadmap of their risk factors. Okay, and within our portfolio, we have actually more than 200 over AI expert systems across different stages of development. These are some of the recent ones, from doing it for chief justice in the high court systems, to the financial planning, to the integrated reporting for public listed companies, to insurance industry, to Islamic backend finance, to become a robo journalist for magazines and market research firms, such that they become the robo Euro Monitor, robo Gartner, or robo AC Nielsen. So these are kind of projects that covers both structured and unstructured data. And we even have, interestingly, something called 10X, where we uncover the DNA, financial, business, personality DNA of all the unicorn leaders like Jack Ma, Elon Musk, Reed Hastings, and Bill Gates, and so on. So we studied their behavior, pattern, strategies, their financials of their business in the last 10 years before they went 10X. And when they became 10X and we began growing 500 to 1,000% in terms of stock price, what was the tipping point? What actually made them successful? So we basically bring it together and turn it into education. So, so the proposed model that we are proposing with the Indian counterparts is that we have what you call the 4x4x4 matrix. First, we identify the 4 strategic focus areas. These are for illustration. So we can target the financial institution, we can target the workforce, we can target the board of corporations or companies, we can even target the business model of businesses. So what we do is we carry out 4 engagement models, carry out webinars, events, we produce research publications using AI, where 80% of the heavy lifting of the research and white paper is done by AI. And then we can also conduct training and certification. And then, of course, at the end of the day, before they actually adopt, embrace expert systems itself, right, they will be aware. They go through the what you call the IDA process, right? Aware, interest, and then they start to desire and then act upon it. So it takes a while for people to adopt AI systems, even by the government. So it's very important to have a clear pathway on how to guide them. So how do we guide them eventually is that once they are aware of the process, the algorithms, the thinking processes, without knowing coding and programming, how can they put the parameters such that it becomes an auto-generated model that can supplement and complement their core traditional activities. So this 4x4x4 matrix illustrate the model. And these are some examples of how we can collaborate with the Indian counterparts in telco, in media, in banking, healthcare, retail, and others. So underneath it, illustrates the use cases that we believe there's demand for it, and there's scope for a lot of in-depth R&D into it. There's a lot of synergies. Like I said, think of Singapore as an inbound and outbound. Import and then re-export to the region and then to the global markets. And that is how MyFinbi actually successfully did just that. So we get expertise internally within Singapore, in Malaysia, Vietnam, Philippines, India, right? And then in Pakistan, combine it together, tap onto their greatest strength, bring it in, and then export it out, license it out, franchise it out, and implement it out through proper local country partners. So with that, I would like to thank Gopi and the chambers for Federation for inviting us, and special thanks also to JS as well as the sponsors, and Krishnan. That's all.
Fantastic, fantastic, Nazir. It's so exciting to see what you have done and the number of areas that you have conquered, and very nimbly so, using resources wherever you found them, is how I understood it. Of course, from an AI standpoint, or for any technology to take off and take off in countries like India and Singapore, funding is important, infrastructure is important, the markets are important. And you have effectively been able to recognize that and provide a platform which enables that as well. India,
Okay,
of course,
yeah, sorry, Gopi, just a point on that. Singapore has been very bullish and very aggressive on the issuance of grant, right? So we have the ESG grant, CDG, PSG grant. And in fact, our robo auditor was actually funded as part of the scheme, what I suggest to the Indian enterprises that want to bring their expertise into Singapore is that they partner with local company, right, as the what you call the technology service provider or solutions provider. And then from there, you target the majority owned local companies that are eligible for those grants. And then from there, the proceeds of the grant paid off by the applicant as well as by the government would be very commercially viable, because now they give up to what, 70-80% subsidy, coverage. So for every $1 million systems, the enterprise only pays like 20 or 30% while the COVID is going on. So, but once there's a the situation subsides, that will be reduced to 60, 50, and even 30%. So right now, the time is right for technologies to come in, help out. Doesn't matter from where you are, as long as it solves the issues that the businesses face, right? And the issues are always very clear. You get government grant, you must be able to do 5 things. Either you lead to increase in revenue, reduce man hours, savings, create new sources of growth, or reduction of process time cycle. So it's very important to work the end in mind, because businessmen won't care about AI. Businessmen want to know what AI can do for me in those 5 areas, right? So I think with them, we don't talk about technology. With them, we talk about the outcome and the pain points that they have. And then behind the scenes, we'll create the architecture, we'll work with our partners, right, to deliver and hit those KPIs that were highlighted. Sorry to interrupt on that one, but I thought
No, absolutely.
very
I think it was
useful to know that the government is very
useful.
supportive. Yeah.
Very useful, Nazri. And good news also is that the Indian government is also taking baby steps in that direction, and recently announced AI related funding through multiple channels. One was recently announced by the Prime Minister himself, RAISE, and R and AI stands for Responsible AI. And there is grants coming in from the defense. The program is called IDEX, and 5 or 6 ministries joined hands, and they have issued grants as well from the government for solving problems which they are facing. These are all new, and these are all because as CII and as industry, we have represented to the government that they do have problems which need to be solved. In fact, our estimate is that the government's AI requirements themselves in India are $200 million, which is a good size, and those need to be solved by businesses, which will allow them to retire risks on their products and then go further. But your point on partnering with a local Singapore company and apply for Singapore grants is fantastic. And I'm sure that there will be many people in the audience who are thinking about asking you questions on that. So the participants, I would request you to be thinking about questions to ask our 2 wonderful speakers who come with a depth of experience. I will also highlight that TCS as well has a Digital Impact Square, which amongst other things provides support for social enterprises, which are solving social problems. I had the opportunity to visit them in Nasik, and just wonderful experience. I look forward to visiting your centers as well, Nazri, and learn from you and the people there. So I have a few questions which I have teed up, and I hope you can respond. We'll do that over the next 15-20 minutes, and then we'll open up for questions from the audience. So again, my request to the audience is tee up your questions, and my request to the coordinators is to please post the questions, and we can pick them up from the Q&A portion whenever they're available. So my first question is around the economics and AI and jobs. So obviously this is a topic of huge discussion. In both our countries, we need to continue to create more jobs. In India, I know that we need to create 100 million new jobs in the next decade. 100 million new jobs is a large number. It's coming from 2 places. One is greater participation of the workforce, and the fact that some of the existing workforce will retire. But really, a lot of it is coming from also the inflow of newer entries into the workforce. So 100 million new jobs. So how does AI impact and how can we leverage it so that we cater to the future in a manner that is inclusive, provides opportunities for everyone. So I'll let Krishnan, why don't you go, and then we'll give Nazri a moment to catch his breath and then come back to him. You're on mute, PRK. You're on mute.
Yeah, thanks, Gopi. The important aspect of AI has been, especially in India context, has been collection and cleaning of data available. So AI will not be effective, like I said, if the data is not cleansed before it actually enters the system. And labeling of data, getting it from different corners of the country has been the biggest challenge. You can look at it as a source of generating new employment, and that is something we need to leverage in terms of the abundance of data available. Can we create talent which can make data ready for AI to operate on? So unless that is there, then the AI is not effective. So that is a generation of employment opportunity. To look at from
and PRK, from a standpoint of being on the top of the value chain,
yeah,
how do we ensure that we are not only creating jobs at the lower end, which would be really important, because there is a lot of people in the rural areas that we need to get into the workforce and get them out of poverty or give them better lifestyles. But at the same time, there is an India which aspires to be on top of the value chain.
correct.
There is an India which wants to have a made in India product released, which is recognized globally as the made in India product. Of course, TCS itself is a made in India product as a company, but a product, top of the value chain operation. How do you think about that?
So if I have to take this a top-down approach, I think we have an opportunity here, like the 30 years back, we were the programming paradise of the world. We have an opportunity to become the AI hub of the world now. And if you look at many of the startups and the innovative ideas coming out, most of them are focusing on platforms, products, and IPs. I call it the 3P strategy. And all the companies in India are encouraging that part of it, which gives a top-down approach compared to the previous generation of people who created the IT industry. So that is the opportunity from a top-down perspective. And the government is essentially giving you a direction. They have to act as a catalyst to enable this to happen in terms of startups as well as academia interaction, in terms of being able to provide the areas in which you should focus on. They're given 7 segments, healthcare and finance are 2 critical ones. We have manufacturing and a few others, which I mentioned. So the opportunity for us to create jobs in those sectors, like Mr. Nazri talked about, the business problem is more important. How you solve it, leave it to the technology guys. I think we have now a canvas on which we look at every sector and see what is the potential to create jobs. And AI complements the jobs. It is not about AI takes away the jobs. So that is the most fundamental. I think you highlighted at the beginning of your pitch, that don't look at it as something is going to take away jobs. Every job which we create today will have an AI as an assistant to enable you to do it better, do it faster, do it cheaper. That should be the intent at the highest levels. Encourage startups, encourage learning platforms, encourage collaboration platforms. The next level of detail is how do we get the data in place for the AI to be able to work on it effectively. So there is a bottom-up approach which brings people from where they are today to a higher level of abstraction, so that they are in a better state of living compared to where they are. That's where I started with the lower half of the opportunity in terms of data labeling and being able to create a common data repository. That was a big exercise in the Tata Trust example I gave, connecting the 89 cancer centers across India and bringing all the data under one repository. While it was technology, it was also a lot of people helping us create the data, because the hospitals have got dispersed process, not standard, not you get it in pieces of paper, you get it in Excel spreadsheet, you get it in all kinds of forms. And we had to bring all of them together. So it is a semi-skilled, I should say, not unskilled labor, semi-skilled labor, where we can create people who can be skilled and then brought up in the strata of the society which they belong. is my humble opinion on that particular part of the society which have to be given jobs to work on. And that's a new space. That's what I'm saying. You are creating a segment which is not there today. So you have an opportunity for people in different strata of the society to bring in there. And then at the analytics and AI, and it's where you want to encourage innovation hubs and centers of excellence, as we talked about.
Yeah.
That's the
Thanks.
opportunity for creating jobs.
Thanks,
Yeah.
PRK. And Nazri, would you help us by taking a startup view, talking about how AI allows startups to get viable quicker than in the past, maybe, and contribute to the economy even better than in the past. If that's okay, if I can request you to do it from a angle of entrepreneurship.
Yep. Yeah, there's good news and bad news to that. Yeah. Good news is that AI is here to stay. According to Forrester's research, in the next 5 years, if you position yourself in a cognitive portion, right, the decisioning portion, that is going to be an industry and a world changer, whether in healthcare, whether in sports, whether in lifestyle, and so on. Now comes the bad news for those who are planning or intending or embarking on the coding and programming side. Now, what we've discovered based on where I am, we work with many universities, many polytechnics. We look at their curriculum, we look at the courses. Doesn't matter in Singapore, in India, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, right? So everybody thinks that by knowing coding, by knowing programming, they are guaranteed a job. They are guaranteed the ability to solve problems for industries, and that is an extremely wrong perception. I think they should be educated early that what's missing in the programming and coding skills is the ability to do design thinking, right, or solving problem solving, as what PRK or Mr. Krishnan was saying. You cannot have a technical skill in isolation of the business awareness on how to solve. It's a decade old or maybe decade old problem, many decades of problem regarding this. So I have people coming to me with a masters of science, with Python knowledge, with R, with SAS, right? But when I ask them further what's their project or how you solve this or what's a framework, they could not, they're stumped. And not just one or two, but hundreds of them for when you want to interview them for that. So those who try to be an entrepreneur, and they feel that by learning coding and programming or getting a CTO to do it, sometimes it may not be the entire solution. An entrepreneur or startup must be an all-rounder. So in US, for example, there have been many ex-Googlers and ex-Facebookers, right, who built platforms that allow people to create their own systems without even knowing programming, right? Some call it visual programming, some call it the drag and drop kind of parameterizing based programming. You might want to think about whether the person should spend more time on design thinking or programming and coding. It's a matter of weightage. I'm not saying it's not important, but it's because they can do AI. No, but they're programmers who can build databases, then that create filters, segment and passing the data, pass to data scientists. Data scientists do the magic, do the last mile. So there is still, I feel, a very gig type of economy that could help entrepreneurs, okay, or recent graduates as a gig economy, operating a gig economy, to provide AI players or established players with that ability to pull information from LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, pull out from various sources and put them in a neat manner. I think there is still a bit of demand on that. Just a matter of taking it further in a gig-based economy. Yeah. So, and of course, the last point I want to add is that the reskilling and upskilling. So not only we seen young graduates trying to be entrepreneurs, but an increasing high number of mid-career, right, professionals who have businesses at the side, who create more ventures. I mean, in the last 20, 30 years, we've seen that happening. But in the last 2 years or so, especially in the last 6 months, in anticipation of unemployment, they will start having plan B, plan C at the side. So what better way than to have a technology-based company that is seamless, light capex, light opex, and still can generate a 10x return. So rather than running a cafe or restaurant, in a very COVID setting, they move towards some kind of knowledge-based solutioning, knowledge-based services. So these are some of the observations that we made. And the curriculum, as I mentioned earlier, needs to be updated, needs to be upgraded, needs to be strengthened with more design thinking, with more forward thinking, and with more problem solving. And you cannot do it theoretically. You have to involve the, industry players like Tata, to come and to provide them with the use cases and the case studies, and then they solve the problem in parallel to what your experienced people are working. And this is exactly what we do in Singapore, Malaysia, and ASEAN. So we don't make the newbies directly involved in the project, but they run parallel to the projects that we have, certify it, train them, expose them. Their CV looks good with all their experiences, and we sign off. The employer and the client also sign off to show that that person has made quite good contributions towards the project. So a little bit of circular economy here, but you've got to make sure that everything gets connected, the dots are connected, and delivered into a way that the ecosystem can accept it and welcome it in a big way. That's my 2 cents worth. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Gargi, I'll just want you to come in and tell us whether you are coordinating the Q&A from the audience. And of course, I'll wait for that, but I just want to make sure that you'll be helping us collect the questions, or do we need the people to raise their hands?
You can ask them to type in their questions in the Q&A section if that's all right.
Yeah, so I've been asking, but I'll ask it again. So do type in the questions in the Q&A section. It should be visible to us as you do it. If you want to raise your hands, please do that. We'll figure that out. So Nazri, question from a fintech standpoint and the examples that you've shared. Obviously, you will have to deal with bias. There is bias which creeps into the data because of how historically, let's say, a loan has been made. And maybe it is not acceptable in future. For example, I'll tell you my first job offer in 1990, not 1990, 1996, after my PhD, was with a credit card company called First USA Bank. So they were looking to use AI techniques for detecting credit fraud as it happened, or even predict credit fraud. So the approach to do that would be, for example, or even giving a loan would be to look at, let's say, a zip code, which looks very innocuous, but a zip code is actually representative of several things, including potentially race or equivalent of that in a country like the US. These are in the longer term maybe not the right way to look at things. So the bias in the data, which is because of history of how we did things, will creep into AI unless we do something about it. Or do you think otherwise?
Yeah, one of the things that the FI sector has been disrupted is because they have been forced to relook into the traditional way of issuing credit, right? So we all have been the product of various credit crises since 1997, 1998, right? All the way to the banking crisis and all that. So from time to time, the banks have to rethink about the way they issue loans, the way they approve the consumer as well as corporate loans. And even right now, we've seen a lot of surge in non-performing loans in some parts of the region, right? NPS just surged tremendously, even with their traditional way of corporate credit review, due diligence, and all that. It has to be rethink. We have to redo and reinvent and relearn, unlearn all the ways of learning credit. Then there was the surge of new startups that came out with all this technology that looks at non-traditional way of looking at credit. So these are the short evolution a little bit. So those who advocate the use of non-traditional credit information, we look at social media, right? We look at phone bills, we look at your utility bills, right? Especially for the rural microfinance institutions, right? So they have to look at all these sources of data. Then the ethics of AI comes in. Okay, so if you are not bankable, therefore you should not be getting the finances. If not, you will cause me problem as a bank, right? So the then question of ethics came in, right? So the question here is, how do you draw that line between commercial and ethics? I think at the gist of your question lies this point, right? To me, AI must not be in a situation to disadvantage people. Okay, there must be something that is prescriptive. Even if you reject somebody, even if you disprove or you decline the application, AI could be used, right, to come up with solution on how to make the person or the entity more bankable. Okay, so if even if you reject based on parameter 1 to 10, but you must come up with 50 solutions using AI, how to help the person sociologically, psychologically, mentally, financially, socially, and so on. So AI must be smart enough to do that by tailoring the solutions. We call it personalized customer experience, pre and post financing, right? So you got to have that. People have to work towards that, such that even if I'm a rejected applicant for bank loan, I don't feel that you reject me. I feel that you care for me. I feel that you're taking care of me, and there are alternatives to that. And
So a
then
more complete approach to
more
the
complete
whole.
approach. Another point I want to add is that if you are unwell, right, would the number of clinics and hospitals change the?
We lost you, Nazri. I think we lost you. I think maybe the thing got knocked off, your connection.
You hear me now?
Yes, again. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I give you one simple example, right, and for the benefit for all. If you are unwell, if you are sick, would the number of clinics and hospitals affect the outcome of your health? That means increasing the number of hospitals and clinics. Would it affect your health or improve your health by having more
Got it.
doctors, more clinics? No, right? Because it's your health. The symptom is what you're experiencing. But taking care of your health, taking care of your diet, your risk, non-smoking, non-drinking, control it, your sleep and rest would be the most critical part. Now, this applies the same context for startups. When you have too many P2P platform, right, crowdfunding platform, you have non-bank, you have digital banks, you have all these new banks happening. So you're creating many platforms, but the root of it is the SMEs are not healthy, the entrepreneurs are not healthy. Increasing the number of platforms will not improve the outcome of the businesses, financial businesses, the financial aspect of the businesses, right? So why I'm saying this is because the crowdfunding platform or P2P platform still have to conduct its own due diligence. It's not free money. You still have to present your business plan. You still have to make it viable. You still need to use people's money, whether debt or equity, right? And you still need to be accountable.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's critical to make sure that things which matter to the outcomes from an unbiased standpoint are taken into consideration. At the same time, biases, let's say gender bias or other biases, are easier to address in data rather than in people, in a way of thinking. I do have Steve Wu, who has come on to ask a question, I believe. He had his hand raised, and Gargi, I think that the Q&A section, I don't see any place where I can type a question, so I think everybody will have the same problem. So if the IT can help open up the Q&A, because even I can't type a question in Q&A right now. I don't see a place to do that.
Sure,
so,
let me.
Yeah, Stephen Wu.
Let me just check with them.
Yeah, Stephen Wu, if you have a question, please go ahead.
No, I don't have a question at the moment. I was just following for general knowledge. If I have, I'll contact one of you.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. So right now, if anybody wants to ask a question, go in and raise a hand by going to your name and clicking more, I think, and raising hand. So I'll continue. The PRK to you would be a follow-up question to that. So from a standpoint of continued discussion on governance, what do you see as critical areas? And Singapore has come out with a governance roadmap and a template from the government. Where are we in India, and what do you see going forward?
Yeah, from an India perspective, I think there are several forums which are essentially developing drafts and submitted to the government for review, and it has to be deployed. One is on the data governance. One is about the usage of AI. And so what is happening is that while the proposals are all very strong, it is not clear yet, at least because I'm part of the Niti Ayog's proposal, which was submitted, and I'm reviewing it as part of the committee. And there's also certain other reports which have been submitted. I personally feel that while the framework is ready, the ownership and who will be responsible for deploying it across the nation is got to be finalized. My thinking in that respect was that we have to have the private and the public businesses owning it from a deployment perspective, while the government can act as a catalyst, and how that could be enabled by a governance body is what I'm seeing as one of the proposals going around. I don't think they have finalized on that, and it is probably high time we get the data privacy issue finalized. Second is in terms of responsible AI. Who is the owner if something goes wrong with the AI algorithm? The accountability part of it is still needs to be addressed. I personally feel the accountability is still with the stakeholder, whether it's a doctor, whether it is a finance, or when it's a bank. I think that at the end of the day, the business owner becomes the owner of that particular algorithm. Those are the
PRK,
things which are very,
the technical aspect of it also I'd like you to comment. One of the issues with AI, of course, is especially with neural network approaches, and all of us know it, is that it's a big black box. And a lot of research has gone into explainability and transparency. So, for example, if AI is used in HR to select a candidate, and you say, okay, you're not selected, but I don't know why you're not selected. My AI is telling you're not selected. It just won't work. So how do you see that evolving?
No,
And then, yeah, go ahead.
Those kind of problems which are in the HR as an example you had given, we have seen it live in some of the cases. So those kind of problems are solvable in terms of the technology perspective, Gopi. But the difficult thing I felt was more in the healthcare industry, where we are taking samples of data from different parts of your community or your country, but the reference data available is from some other country. The decisions or the predictions made by the algorithms cannot be validated by the doctor, neither can it be explained by the algorithm. Those are the tougher scenarios we are, as we speak in TCS, we are facing with many of our customers.
But empirical, we are used as technologists and also as a community. We have used empirical formulas which don't have any proof. As long as they work, it works, right? So why is AI particularly difficult when right from any law you pick, any law, including Einstein's relativity, it's all empirical.
Yeah. So I think there is also a question of what you call as aging of the particular technology. People have to start developing the trust. It takes a while, and it does not happen overnight. Especially when the reason I highlighted healthcare is because there you are dealing with lives of patients, and the doctors have to make the final call.
That is actually there. Wouldn't you agree, PRK, that AI doesn't have to take the call? AI can provide assistance to the doctor. And maybe that's the answer even in the HR case. I think Nazri has a point to make. After that, we have 2 questions in the chat window, so I'll go there.
Yeah, my answer is just very quick. As I mentioned earlier, as far as healthcare or even non-medical situation is concerned, there must, even like fintech, right? There must be a basis for you to explain. So AI can be used to explain why your conditions are of a certain level, right? High, medium, the granularity of it. So there must be the ability to diagnose the causality, the causation, the correlation needs to be studied and it needs to be explained why the performance is like that. So when we work with developmental banks, for example, from a fintech standpoint, before we move to HR and medical, from a fintech standpoint, whether by gender or what, you're rejecting because of gender, then it will flag. Oh, you are rejected because of gender and therefore this is not right, right? There are 9 other factors that could be considered or mitigated. So there must be some risk mitigation aspects of it whenever you reject a particular financing application. From a HR standpoint, same thing. You accept a person because of 5 attributes. You reject a person because of 20 attributes. And these 20 attributes are identified. Even though the backend is black box, right? Front end wise, the interface wise, there must be a report that goes to the HR practitioner, as well as a report even to the applicant, right, to understand and make it more developmental in that sense, so that they can improve themselves in the future. So I like to think that AI and data analytics can be used to empower people to become better, provided they are open-minded for that. Yeah. Then from a healthcare perspective, very quickly, is that
just on that before you move on, Nazri.
Yeah.
So today, yes, attribute-based interview process. You don't even need AI of the nature of deep learning. It is overkill. If you have 10 attributes, statistical technique is also maybe an overkill, because you can just look at it by plots. But if you're, like you said, natural language processing, and somebody is using body language with a video camera and natural language processing to determine make some decision, which is possible, and which is possibly right, but it is unexplainable at the end of it right now. So those are the things which maybe a bit of nuanced approach is required.
Yeah.
You don't have to comment on that because you have another point to make.
Okay. I think just to add a final note on the healthcare, because currently we are working with nephrologists to look at the kidney failures, right? Type 1, type 2 diabetes. So according to these experts, there's a way to explain the condition of your kidney linked to all the various parts of your organs, and then predict in the next 2 years the probability of renal failure based on what you call clinical tests and data.
Clinical trials, yeah.
Therefore, the industry is moving towards, currently they're not implementing yet, but they're working with us to collect all the patient data and to carry out back testing, forward testing, all these indicators. So
Right.
it's not just your kidney, but it's linked to your liver, lungs, and your diet and everything. So it's quite a very scary exercise, because the level of people or patients who need dialysis is far more overwhelmed by people who are likely to get dialysis in the next 2 to 3 years. So you have the bunch of people who go through dialysis, right? And then you have the larger population who have not yet gone through dialysis, but the high probability of them entering into that. And then it traces back to their lifestyle, to their gender or their genes, right? Their diet and so on and so forth.
No, absolutely. In fact, some of the work that we are doing is exactly that. So you can look at health at the organ and tissue level, which is old. You can look at health at the cellular level, which is new, which is looking at inflammatory and metabolic states non-invasively, which is brand new, because you could predict, at least to some extent by blood tests, cellular health. So for example, C-reactive protein is an indication of chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation in turn predicts diabetes and need for dialysis. And then going into the subcellular level. So in a manner, I think you both have indicated previously, it is not just AI, it's an intersection of AI with other technologies. In this particular case, it will be AI, biology, and maybe even advanced material science and advanced material technology. There are 2 questions which I'll bring in from the audience. One is from the initials are FH. And the question is around what are the immediate opportunities for technology collaborations between Singapore and India? If both of you can take a swing at that. PRK, you can go. Or Nazri, you can go ahead.
Maybe I pass to Mr. Krishnan because I've spoken, and maybe I'll continue after that.
Yeah. So from an immediate collaborations perspective, I personally believe that India would definitely need the help. I don't know whether you call it tech, but more on what Gopi checked on the previous question is about explainable AI and responsible AI, putting a governance framework on privacy of data, security, and anonymizing the data. Those aspects is something which Singapore could probably help India do that. From a education and skill development perspective, I think we have an opportunity to jointly develop a platform, or like Nazri said, about a center of excellence which can be developed and have a joint product roadmap on any one of the domains which are critical to both the nations. I think those are the immediate tech collaboration area. I think what is urgent is about the regulatory requirements and discipline to be followed. But from a technology perspective, I think education could be the starting point because of the scalable nature of this particular industry.
Thank you. And
Yeah,
Nazri?
to answer the question posed by one of the attendees, would AI be helpful for SMEs and how would it be helpful for SMEs in COVID times, right? So as mentioned earlier, SMEs and business owners won't be interested in AI per se, right? They will not be wowed or impressed about your AI capabilities, but they want to know what AI can do for them eventually and what's the outcome, right? So we have a program in place where we are currently helping up to 150,000 SMEs going through a problem with COVID in the region through the government agencies, right? We call this the Restore and Rebuild program. If you look at the screen, it talks about how companies can get help, and using AI, we basically pull information from your financial data, for your non-financial data, and so on, and you get 5 deliverables. Okay, you get the financial strategy report, and this is something we are very keen to work with CII and in between 2 countries. So going through financial health check is very important to help SMEs because cash flow is a problem. We need to measure the granularity or severity of the cash flow. So using AI, we can develop the financial strategy report and roadmap for you. There'll be a robo-generated voice that explains the findings, a natural language voice that explains your financial health under 3 minutes. Then we have a 10-page report for you, and then we have an industry scanning report, and then there's a mentoring digitally done one-on-one, followed by 1-hour group workshop in 3 sessions, and then optional would be a roadmap to come up with 10x upon your recovery. So this is very, very popular amongst government agencies or SME agencies that want to push it to the client, to the SMEs downstream. Why? Because SMEs make up about 90% of the establishments and hire about 60 to 70% of the workforce. Anything fail, right? They will cause more unemployment. They will cause more problems for the economy in a big way. So you're talking about a massive industry-wide problem that needs to be handled, and you can have human consultant running all over the place to give one-on-one coaching. You need a machine that can do 150,000 companies under 3 weeks, for example, that can analyze very quickly and then pass the roadmap to them and get some help as a result. So it's about MRI scanning, it's about financial scanning, it's about X-ray, the health, and then measure the health and then come out with the solutions for that. So that answers one of the questions from the audience. Yeah. So and then the other question is what are the immediate activities, right? So to me, there's 2 ways, which I was typing halfway, 2 ways to be done: ad hoc and structured. Okay, ad hoc means that, like you are in a freelancer, Fiverr.com, you try to pitch your thing in a gig economy, and an order comes, you come in. Okay, that's very ad hoc, right? Structured is for the 2 countries to consider merging or at least synergizing our centers of excellence together, carry out systematic programs via the 4x4x4 matrix, then carry out matching, use AI, use human to basically connect businesses together. So we need quickly the private sector to drive this, as one of you suggested, and then the government will be more of a facilitator or enabler. That's the way to do it. Yeah.
Thank you, Nazri. The audience is also requesting email contact for the speakers or any way to contact the speakers. So I'll request CII to do what is appropriate for the participants with appropriate, I guess, okay from the from Nazri and Krishnan. I would like to wrap up now. I would request Krishnan and Nazri to both give a couple of closing comments. I would request you to, if possible, give some guidance to CII and to the respective governments on what is the 1 or 2 things that they can do to essentially make this real India-Singapore emerging technology and innovation partnership with a focus on AI. What is the best thing because CII has a voice into the Indian government side and also maybe the Singapore government. So what is your advice?
Shall I go first?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Pierre.
Yeah, so I think I have three suggestions. One is about the scaling the skill development both for Singapore and India, which is probably very critical given where we are today. And given that platforms and digitally connected world is at our disposal today, all of us work from home. I think we can use this opportunity to take that as the first step. The second step from an India perspective is I'm probably talking about it the third time, is about the data privacy, because I just keep worrying about the fact that people may get exploited in India because of their ignorance or because of access issues. I think that is the framework which I know a lot of forums have submitted proposals, but I think it has to be hastened. These are the top two priorities, but from India and Singapore perspective. The third perspective would be what we have been talking about, setting up a joint COE, similar to the digital square I talked about in Nashik. I think that could be something which can take a pilot and kind of experiment it and see how it works between the government sponsored through to private sector organizations. I think these are the three things.
So PRK, can I take it that TCS will be part of the sponsorship?
You are putting me in a spot.
You don't have to answer.
TCS makes a lot of money, so.
Yeah, Nazri, how about yourself?
Well, I've made little money, so. On a serious note, we are able to collaborate technologically, strategically across markets. So there are 5 suggestions that I would like to give to Gopi and CII. These suggestions centered to what you call the 5 I's, alphabet I. So one is the internalization. That means there are things that CII and India have, there are things that Singapore and MyFinB have that needs to be internalized. Internalized means we map our processes, our business model, our economic model, whether we agree on this import, export kind of inbound, outbound kind of model. Agree on that, then the market, the world is your oyster, right? So it's not just about Singapore, India, it's about Singapore, India, then ASEAN, right? And then move on to Central Asia, Europe, and so on. So first we need to internalize, list out the areas and agree on the business model, socio-economic model, right? Whether it's through the centers of excellence and all that. Second is the integration, right? The second I is on integration. So how do we integrate? What is the modus operandi? What is a conduit for us to place ourselves and communicate and immerse, exchange ideas? Will it be a one-off thing? Will it be a monthly thing? Will it a digital thing? And how often is it, right? So we need to have that dialogue more often if we want to take it off. Integrate in terms of the minds, in terms of the processes, in terms of the efforts, the manpower that goes into this, right? So the third I is basically the innovation. We must decide which industries we want to hit and what sort of technology we want to absorb and we want to re-export, right? So you talk about natural language, which part? If TCS is into, let's say, imaging, right? Digital imaging yourself even, right? And digital AI imaging. How do you do that? AR, VR, how do you put that into healthcare, for example? So these are the areas that we must identify in a structured manner. Which part of the innovation are we looking at? And how do we produce the idea? How do we pilot it? So innovation looks at the prototype, MVP, and then, of course, the beta and the Gen 1 version. So there has to be a very clear process of how innovation manifests itself, right? So the fourth I is actually investments, i.e. the funding. Popular question that surfaces quite a bit. So funding comes from government, comes from corporate, and comes from, in certain occasions, NGOs, right? Foundations and all that for social impact measurement activities. Okay, donations, the zakat, the alms, and so on. So there's the zakat type of money, which is the spiritual type of money, donations. There's the CSR from the corporates, right, that want to put their money into larger causes. That's why AI has to be very impactful. It cannot just be about commercialization, the triple bottom line, SDG 17, ESG, right? All these got to come in and blended into AI, right? So, and of course, from the, what do you call that, government through the grants and incentives and all that. That's the fourth I. So the last I is actually called internationalization. So my suggestion to CII and our government is to, through the conduit, right, through the platform, right? How do you actually inbound and then outbound. Which region, which markets do you want to hit, right? And this is where the combination of market presence, market knowledge, and market distribution points, which I have and you have not touched it yet, and markets that you have that I've not touched it yet I can absorb your technology and put it there, and you can absorb some of my technology to put it over your site. So the internationalization process talks about the iteration, the packaging, the structuring of the partnership that enables us to import or partner and then re-export back in a branded way, right? In a integrated branded way. So the market will be confused about what sort of technology this is, right? Yeah. So is it a consortium? Is it a single brand? Is it multiple brand? It has to be single brand, but behind it could be a consortium of companies, which is a traditional model, right? But now we are just putting it in a digital economic kind of setting in a much faster way. Yeah. So these are my 5
very well done. Yeah.
Very step-by-step approach, systematic approach to get the governments going, and then to get the private sectors coming in a big way, rather than in an ad hoc way.
So lovely. I think great inputs from both of you. What I'll request CII is, if it is a single pager as well, it should be documented and it should be moved so that we get key inputs from both of you and throughout the discussion what we had in front of the right people. We do have a wonderful opportunity ahead of us in AI. It's a $150 billion market globally. And India has 100,000 AI personnel. Singapore has great research institutions and process and an ability to bring to bear to these markets. Between us, we can get a big bite of this market and do it in a manner which we are very good at in this sub-region, which is to do it in a manner which is friendly to the earth as well, thinking about development in a much more holistic way. So again, I take this opportunity on behalf of CII to thank both of the speakers, Mr. Nazri and PRK. And on behalf of the audience, and on behalf of the speakers, I would like to thank CII and in particular Gargi and Jayesh for helping us put this together. And even if it is 10 bullets, I want it to be in front of the right audience coming out from this meeting. So thank you, everybody. And Gargi, I'll hand it back to you in case there are any housekeeping aspects that you want to.
No, we are good. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.